What's up everybody, my name is Phosphoros and today I'm going to be teaching you how to play Arcane in Dragonflight patch 10.1.5. I'll be telling you exactly what to press and what order for optimal damage, so let's get right into it. Now before we get started, I just want to add a little disclaimer. My goal with these guides is to provide you the most sim-accurate information in an easily presented manner without going over 20 minutes. The issue is I can't edit this video after it's posted, so if you're watching this a couple weeks after it's posted, make sure to head to the description or the pinned comment where I'll have linked the written guides that I cross-reference my information from, as well as any update videos or comments that I think might be necessary. With that out of the way, let's get into the talents. On the general tree highlighted in green, you'll see the talents that I consider to be a requirement. These are talents that will give you a direct damage increase and should be included in every build. One thing to note here is that Temporal Warp allows you to have 2 Time Warp buffs active at the same time, so the play is to always try and double up on Temporal Warp whenever possible. As for the rest of the talents on the general tree, it's all up to you based on what you feel you need. I like going mostly defensive talents in Arcane Warding, Winter's Protection, Tempest Barrier, Cryo Freeze, Diverted Energy, and Accumulative Shielding. Mass Barrier and Ice Cold are also really good talents that I highly recommend in pretty much all content. The only exception is you may not want to take Ice Cold if there's a mechanic that you'd rather immune with Ice Block. Keep in mind also that Ice Cold interacts with both Cryo Freeze and Winter's Protection, so you can actually heal 80% of your health over the duration, in addition to a 70% damage reduction. Onto the Arcane tree, this is the pure single target build. The single target build revolves around abusing Nether Precision by weaving Arcane Missiles together with Arcane Blasts. Our goal is to get as many empowered Arcane Blasts out as we possibly can, and you'll notice this causes about half your damage to be attributed to Arcane Blast. Nether Tempest also has a pretty strong synergy with Arcane Echo in that each time Nether Tempest ticks, it also procs Arcane Echo. So not only is it good for damage during our Touch of the Magi windows, it's also a great tool for mana management, as you'll see later on. We also take Siphon Storm, Harmonic Echo, and Conjure Mana Gem as our capstones, and all of these serve to further empower us during our burst windows. Now whenever you have more than one target, you can use this build for Funnel Cleave. The difference between this build and the single target build is that we take Arcane Cleave, which allows Arcane Barrage to spread to nearby targets. This is where we get the cleave damage from. And it also interacts with Resonance, which gives Arcane Barrage 10% more damage per target it spreads to. And that's where we get the funnel damage from. In addition to this, we also take the Orb Barrage capstone, which gives Arcane Barrage a chance to shoot out a free Arcane Orb. As for Mythic Plus, this is the AoE build. This build is very similar to the Funnel Cleave build. You just remove 1 point in Improved Arcane Missiles and put it into Reverberate instead. You can also remove a point in Improved Clearcasting and put it into utility like Chrono Shift or Improved Prismatic Barrier, as it's a very minor difference in AoE. Now before we move into the single target rotation, I'd like to speak a bit about Arcane's damage pattern. Arcane has a very ebb and flow style to its damage pattern. About every 45 seconds you'll have a big burn with Arcane Surge, followed by a period of low filler damage, into a mini burn, followed by another period of low filler damage, and then the cycle repeats. Alright, let's head into the single target rotation. 10 seconds before the pull starts, you want to be spamming Arcane Explosion to fish for a clearcasting proc. This part may vary based on your haste levels, but in general, 4 seconds before the pull starts, you want to cast Evocation so we can start stacking Siphon Storm. At around 2 seconds, you want to cast Arcane Blast into an Arcane Orb precast. The pull has now begun, and at this point you should have 4 Arcane Charges, since on the live servers, Siphon Storm is giving us a free Arcane Charge on cast. This, however, isn't reflected in the tooltip and probably isn't intended, so if they end up removing that, you'd want to cast an extra Arcane Blast before starting your Radiant Spark ramp. Either way, once you reach 4 Arcane Charges, you pop Radiant Spark, Nether Tempest into Arcane Surge, Mana Gem, and then Arcane Barrage. While Arcane Barrage is traveling, you want to cast Touch of the Magi and make sure Touch of the Magi is applied before your Arcane Barrage lands. The reason we pop Touch of the Magi while Barrage is traveling is that we gain about an extra second of Touch of the Magi uptime, while still benefiting from Barrage inside it. Also, Touch of the Magi itself gives us 4 Arcane Charges, so right after Touch of the Magi we want to cast 3 Arcane Blasts to finish up our Radiant Spark ramp. After this we follow a simple priority list of Nether Precision buffed Arcane Blasts, Clearcasted Arcane Missiles, and regular Arcane Blasts. One thing to note here is that when you're casting Clearcasted Arcane Missiles, it's actually a DPS gain to cut the channel short and cast more Arcane Blasts instead. Clearcasted Arcane Missiles are really only good for giving us Nether Precision stacks and buffing Arcane Blast, so once you channel your Arcane Missiles, just start spamming Arcane Blast to end the channel as soon as possible. You want to follow this list until your Siphon Storm buff expires, then cast Shifting Power, and that's the end of the Arcane Surge burn. After the Surge burn, we head into the filler rotation. The filler rotation consists of following a simple priority list. Cast Arcane Orb at less than 2 Arcane Charges, Arcane Blast with Nether Precision, Arcane Missiles with Clear Casting, and regular Arcane Blasts. In each 1 minute and 30 second cycle of Arcane's cooldowns, you'll be in the filler rotation twice, and you'll notice that in the second filler rotation, you might start running dry on mana. To counteract this, you want to stop clipping your Arcane Missile casts early when you reach around 30% mana, and you want to incorporate casting Nether Tempest to keep the debuff up when you have 4 Arcane Charges. The reason we cast Nether Tempest only at 4 Arcane Charges is that the damage over time snapshots based on how many Arcane Charges we had when we applied it, so you only really want to apply and refresh it at 4 Arcane Charges. If you run out of mana, you can also cast Arcane Barrage, and then that would put you back at the top of the filler rotation, where you want to Arcane Orb at less than 2 Arcane Charges. Once Radiant Spark and Touch of the Magi are back off cooldown, it's time to head into the mini burn rotation. Make sure you have 4 Arcane Charges, pop Radiant Spark, Nether Tempest, Arcane Barrage into Touch of the Magi while Barrage is traveling right before it lands, and then 4 Arcane Blasts to finish up our Radiant Spark ramp. After this, we follow a simple priority list of Nether Precision buffed Arcane Blasts, clear-casted Arcane Missiles, and regular Arcane Blasts. Once again, remember that you should be cutting your Arcane Missile casts short in favor of casting more Arcane Blasts. You want to follow this list until Touch of the Magi drops, then enter back into the filler rotation until Evocation comes off cooldown, and the rotation effectively resets back to the Arcane Surge burn stage. Here's a quick 3-minute segment of me performing the single target rotation on a training dummy. I'll have text pop up showing what part of the rotation I'm in so you can follow along, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the comments. Now let's head into the AoE portion of the guide. We want to begin using the AoE rotation when we reach 3 targets, so here's what the Surge burn will look like. Radiant Spark into Nether Tempest, then cast Arcane Surge into Arcane Barrage. Couple things to take a note of here. You want to make sure you aren't spellqueuing this Arcane Barrage with Arcane Surge. If you're not sure what it means to spellqueue, I'll have an explanation of it down in the description, as well as the reason why you should avoid doing it in AoE. But you pretty much just want to let the Arcane Surge cast go off, and then cast Arcane Barrage. While Arcane Barrage is traveling, you want to cast Touch of the Magi and make sure Touch of the Magi is applied before your Arcane Barrage lands. Now, due to the Orb Barrage talent, every time you cast Arcane Barrage, you have a chance to shoot out a free Arcane Orb, which may mess up your Radiant Spark stacks. Because of this, it'll be simpler for me to just post the different variations of the Radiant Spark ramp on the screen, and you can follow along depending on which Arcane Barrage procs Arcane Orb. Now trust me, this looks a lot more complicated than it is, and if you think it's annoying to play around, I agree with you. But once you practice and take it slow in a training dummy, it becomes a bit more intuitive. In general, you always want to cast a 4 charge barrage at 2 and 4 stacks of Radiant Spark. At 3 stacks of Radiant Spark, if you're fighting 5 or less targets, you want to either Arcane Blast if you have 4 Arcane charges, or Arcane Orb if you have 0 Arcane charges. If you're facing 6 or more targets, you just cast Barrage at 4 Arcane charges, or Orb at 0 charges. Once your Radiant Spark ramp ends, you're pretty much following the AoE filler rotation until your Siphon Storm buff wears off, and then you cast Shifting Power. The filler rotation for AoE is a simple priority list. Maintain Nether Tempest at more than 6 targets if you have 4 Arcane charges, Arcane Orb at less than 2 Arcane charges, Arcane Barrage at 4 Arcane charges, and Arcane Explosion until 4 Arcane charges. As for Arcane Orb usage, make sure you save at least 1 charge for your Surge and mini burns, since you'll need it during the Radiant Spark ramp if Orb Barrage doesn't proc. Now for the mini burn. Cast Radiant Spark into Nether Tempest, and then cast Arcane Barrage into Touch of the Magi while Barrage is traveling right before it lands. From here, you follow any of these variations based on how your Orb Barrage procs. Once your Radiant Spark ramp is over, you enter back into the filler rotation until Evocation's off cooldown, and the rotation effectively resets back to the Arcane Surge burn stage. Here's a quick 2-minute segment of me performing the AoE rotation on a group of training dummies. Keep in mind that in this clip I'm getting multiple burns out, but in a Mythic Plus scenario you'll mostly be alternating between the Arcane Surge burn and mini burn between packs. Alright guys, that's the end of the video. I hope this saved you some time and brought you up to speed. If you have any questions at all, feel free to ask in the comments. I'm very active there. Please subscribe. I appreciate the support, and I wish you a very nice day. Take care.